This is Radio Free 501c. I'm your host, Cecilia Sapp. Rogue Tulips Consulting presents a special edition of Radio Free 501c. We're going back to our roots with Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, our original show title. It started with a conversation, and then we got an idea. Let's put it on YouTube. On this computer.
It's recording.
So hi everyone, welcome to Chatting with Cecilia and Agnes. Our name changed a few times. We started out as Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, and then our show became Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, Nonprofit Conversations. We became Nonprofit Conversations when Agnes had to depart the show, and then we came into our own as Radio Free 501c. 250 episodes since 2019, more than 145 guests, and now she's back. One of the people who started it all, Agnes Amos-Coleman, my friend and former co-host. She's here to celebrate the special edition of Radio Free 501c. That's right, episode 250. We have a deep and long discussion about legacy and the future of nonprofit management. You're going to want to hear the whole conversation. It's August 12th, 2024. Welcome to episode 250. Hey everybody, it's Monday, August 12th, and guess what? It's not just time for another episode of Radio Free 501c. It's time for the 250th episode of Radio Free 501c. I am so excited. When we started this podcast back in 2019, my friend Agnes and I had no idea it would go on for 6 seasons. And even though Agnes had to depart the show, she is back. She is my special guest this episode. My friend and former co-host, Agnes Amos-Coleman, is here to help celebrate our 250th episode. But before we dive into celebrating the history of our podcast and everything we've done with it so far, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, wherever you may be. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So, Agnes, you're back. I'm so excited. We've stayed in touch, but unfortunately, our audience may not know what you've been up to. So would you like to say hello and kind of catch everybody up on what you're doing now?
That's great. Thank you, Cecilia. I am delighted to be back and to join you in celebrating the 250 episodes of what used to be called Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia. So I am so privileged to come back again. And since I've been gone, as you know, I did a little bit of consulting and became a mother and then ended up in full-time work. So now I work for RA Plus Events. They're an international trade show events management company, and I work as the international show director. Thank you to my boss, Gary, who's given me the opportunity to appear on your show because I couldn't have done it without him. And a shout out to our CEO, Stephen Miner, who is an excellent leader. So I've really been very privileged to work for RA Plus. And in Anaheim this year, we have our conference coming up. We're expecting, it's our flagship event called RE Plus 24. We're expecting over 40,000 attendees. And this has been managed by our domestic operations team, and they're doing a fabulous job. It's been great. So we're celebrating 20 years of the company. So that's why you see RE Plus background behind me there. So thank you, Cecilia. Again, it's been a privilege to share stage with you again after we had about 145 seasons, right?
We did together 149 episodes.
There you go.
And you departed the show in May of 2022. So I can't believe it's been 2 years already.
Time flies when you're having fun. And I've been having a lot of fun.
Well, and also I need to share with the audience also when you have to do all the guest management too, because when Agnes was with the show, she did our guest management. Yes, and right before Agnes left, she had booked us out for an entire year. So it was great. So all I had to do was, follow up with everyone. And now I do all the guest management too, but it's great. We've added a podcast guest application. So for people who I may not know personally, or haven't met through a networking event, they can fill out an application and say, hey, I'd like to be on your show, and here's my topic. And so, always happy to get those from people. But yeah, it really has grown a lot. And so I have to say, I am so thrilled that we've hit 250 episodes because
Congratulations, Cecilia. That's amazing.
thank you. And it's like, and Agnes, I have to thank you for this because I want to give the audience a little background on how this whole thing got started. So Agnes and I used to work together. That's how we met. And then after we both left the organization, we just stayed in touch and stayed friends. And we would just have these really long conversations. And we were also doing some consulting work together at the time. And we'd have these long, very deep conversations about important topics. And so one day I said to Agnes, Agnes, these discussions on these important topics that we have are really good. We should record these and share them with the world. What do you think? And Agnes said, okay. And so that's how it started. We started as a YouTube only series with very little production. You probably remember that, Agnes.
I sure do. It's been, it was great. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. And not only that, you remember I went through a very trying time with my own personal issues, transitioning and bringing our son home and really having to look forward to this. Episodes were great for me because they were a good distraction, and it was an opportunity for you and I just to do what we're passionate about. Because when we started out, Cecilia, if you remember, the focus was to provide a platform for professionals where they can go to and get just in time solution to their challenges. So they don't need to, all they need to do is they need to just get on the podcast if they're facing some challenges at work, or even if they just need ideas on how to solve issues. That was what we wanted to accomplish. And I'm so delighted that we were able to do that together, and your audience, or our audience at that time, was able to get the benefits of what we were doing.
Yes. And it's really evolved a lot because for those of you who did not ever hear of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia when it was only on YouTube, we started out talking about Agnes's book, Transforming Business for Godly Governance. And our first 3 episodes were a discussion of each section of that book. And if I recall correctly, it is still available on Amazon. Am I correct?
It's still there. I haven't had a lot of time focusing on books lately because I have a full-time job, but it's still there. All the books are still on Amazon. You're right. Yes.
And it was a great series to kick off with, I thought, and really enjoyed the book. I have my own copy, of course. But it was in the beginning, and I'm saying this because for those of you out there who maybe have a newer podcast or thinking about starting one, Agnes and I went with the flow and we evolved as things changed. So it started out, it would just be me and Agnes. And then one day Agnes said to me, maybe we should have a guest on once a month. And I said, that's a good idea. Why don't we do that? And then it just snowballed into every episode we had a guest. And at one point I said to Agnes, I really think we need to save like an episode every so often for just you and me to just talk without a guest. But we had so much fun meeting people, talking to different people. We just committed to having guests every episode. And Agnes, because of her background, was able to introduce us to a lot of people from around the world.
But that's what made it even more dynamic, Cecilia, because we were able to bring on this guest to share different perspectives. And sometimes, yes, we have our own perspective, and you and I love to chat, but having guests come on show with us was so important because we heard it from a different perspective, what they're going through, the best practices in their organization. And I really do believe that it added value to our audience. It gave them that, different level of thought process that if it was just you and I that continued to do the show, that they probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. At least that's my perspective. I don't know what you're thinking, Cecilia.
Well, I agree with you because one of the things I like to do with the podcast is have people on who maybe haven't been on a podcast before, or who maybe are lesser known. Maybe they're building their career. They have a new idea. This summer, this is 2024, for those of you listening in the future, because I often joke about being famous in the future somebody will find all of these recordings 500 years from now and know what we were talking about. But just trying to do that this summer, I actually put out a call for fresh voices for the podcast. It's very easy to keep inviting the same people back over and over again because you're comfortable with them, they're interesting. But why not give other people an opportunity? I think that's really important. And a lot of the guests that have been on the show, I would say in the last 2 years, have never been on a podcast before.
That's amazing.
And it's a great experience for them because it's very comfortable. They know that they're going to look good because it's recorded and produced. But I really think that's important, to have a platform for people. And that's why I really like the radio free aspect of the branding of the podcast now. For those of you who may not remember, Radio Free 501c was the name of a blog we used to have that tried to have a different perspective. But over time, I have, merged everything into Rogue Tulips, and we only have one website now, thank goodness. So we have one website, but this was the old blog on the 501c League website.
And one of the things that, Cecilia, that's so important for our guests to understand was that we wanted it to be, even though our focus was non-for-profit, the association community, because that's where you and I kind of lived a lot of our career path. We wanted it to be, of course, global, because we believe that, associations all over the world have the same focus, maybe implemented or executed differently. And we also wanted it to kind of cut across all professionals, whether they work in the for-profit, the non-for-profit, or even in the corporate world. And if you remember all the topics that we were talking about, there were topics that could be adaptable across all platforms. So that's another thing, Cecilia, if you recall, that I personally think that we did very well, and we were able to engage a lot of business professionals across the globe and in different fields of business. And I thought that was remarkable.
I agree, because the nonprofit management community is made up of people in all of those areas you just mentioned. There's industry partners, there's consultants, there's people who work on staff, there's volunteers and the members, and they can get something out of these conversations as well and take something away. So I think you're absolutely right. And I have tried to continue that spirit because you had said early on, I really want this to be a resource for people, for our colleagues in the community. And I have a whole mix of people. I have people on staff, I have consultants, I have industry partners will come on the show or be invited on the show. And everybody comes away with a good experience being on the show, but also it gives not just that information to the whole community, but it gives that person a way to showcase themselves. So you can show people what you know, you show people what you do. So I really like that aspect of it too. And it's also a lot of fun. I get to meet a lot of people doing the podcast that I've never met before, because they just say, hey, let me fill out the application and I connect with them. Or, maybe I meet them at a networking event online or in person and say, hey, why don't you sound interesting. Why don't you come to the podcast? And they do. So, and we've covered all of the big topics last couple of years. So, we're continuing to talk about governance. We're continuing to talk about board of directors. We're continuing to talk about artificial intelligence. We're talking, and a lot of the blog posts that I write are advocating on behalf of the profession and supporting some of these newer ideas that people have, because we can't keep doing what we've been doing, and we can't keep doing it over and over again. We have to break out of that.
Agreed.
It may have worked before, but that doesn't mean it's going to work now, because it's a different world.
And that kind of leads me to one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last maybe 2-3 years, and more so now as I begin to think about sunset in my career over the next 5 years. What do I do, and how do I leave that lasting legacy at RA Plus, the job that I'm currently at right now? And I know that you're very passionate about this as well, because you and I have had similar conversations around this topic. And the topic is mentoring and coaching new generation leaders. You and I know that without those future leaders, there will be no association. And we need to do a better job as the association community to make sure that we prepare these future leaders to take over. And that's really what you and I think I really need to, it's a perspective that I think that you and I can share on this podcast today, and get your thoughts on it, and hear what you're doing in the association community. And I mean, of course, in my own little way, I know what I'm doing in my business environment, but I just wanted us to have an open conversation around this. So what are you thinking, Cecilia?
It's one of my passion topics. I commit to it. I do it. I don't just talk about it. So as a consultant right now, what I do is I mentor people in the profession, both other consultants and people on staff, because some newer consultants, they're just starting out. Maybe they have questions about, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? I've actually taken the lead on organizing consultants through our ASAE Collaborate community and bringing us together. And one of the things we do in that group, we do an informal networking meeting every month. And one of the things we do is help the newer consultants. It's not an age thing. It's just like, well, how new is your business? So you may have a year-old business or just started one, or maybe you're thinking of starting a consultancy. And we help people with that. Like, we mentor each other. We share ideas. We share lessons learned. And that's really important. And then passing that on to other people in the profession. As you know, I'm very passionate about the Certified Association Executive designation. I have been ever since I've gotten it. I've created over the last few years an education program for people getting ready for the CAE exam, but also offering some courses to help people renew the exam or just to stay fresh on what our domains of practice are. And I also have the Advanced Certified Nonprofit Professional designation, which is renewable just like the CAE. And that has a very similar body of knowledge. Why is that? Because we're one profession with one body of knowledge. It doesn't matter what kind of 501c it is. And so on the legacy portion of mentoring and paying it forward and coaching people, you know, I really, what I would like to do is leave the profession better off when I do leave this profession. Because we need to advocate for ourselves. We need to advocate for ethics. I was appointed to the ASA Ethics Committee for the 2024-2025 year because ethics is very important to me. And that's something we have to model and mentor other people on. So thoughts on that?
I think you touched on a lot of the things that I've been thinking about as well. You're right. This industry does need, again, when we look at the future, we need to put the industry in the hands of capable leaders. That's my passion right now. And a lot of the areas that I've been doing that is just mentoring people, even, that that are connected to me, who reach out to me and say, Agnes, we've heard about you. We know you're doing great things in the industry. What are some of the best practices out there? And it's just really sharing experiences, some of the things that I've done, mistakes that I've made, and really looking at how to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes, and working with them on, how do you work with partners? How do you engage people? Because in the industry, we have to carry people along with us. It's just really having some of those down to earth. It doesn't have to be anything formalized, but something more, just coaching, mentoring, working with them at the level that they're at, to help them advance their career, and to kind of advise them that you can lead the future of the industry, but you've got to start somewhere. And starting somewhere means that, you do your best, you provide excellence, you identify what the industry best practices are, because that's really the foundation of what we have in the association community. We want to strive for excellence. It's excellence or nothing. That's the way I see it. Personally, I mean, that's what drives me. It's excellence or nothing. And sometimes I know people think it's not reachable, but it is. But it starts somewhere. And as long as we have that mindset that, we can get there, it's achievable, it's attainable, and it just takes a baby steps. And it doesn't take rocket science. It just needs that tenacity, that, desire, and that commitment that our association community needs.
I agree with you 100%. I was just chuckling a little bit because hearing you say that again with so much passion, and just reminds me of how nice it is to have you back to have these conversations. And also because I agree with that position as well. Excellence is what you strive for in everything you do. You always do the best. If you only have 85% to give that day, then give all 85%.
Exactly.
Don't hold back. Do the best you can. And you're right. I agree with you. Excellence is a process. It's not going to happen immediately. It's why we need to mentor each other. It sounds like you do a lot of micro mentoring like I do.
Yes, I do. And I find it very fulfilling and engaging, actually. And again, I don't know whether because I'm getting to that age now where, getting to the top of my career is not as relevant anymore. It's really looking back and saying, what is that legacy that I'm going to be able to leave behind? Am I going to walk away from the organization and people just never even remembered I showed up? Or do I walk away from the organization, sunset my career, and people say, we remembered her because she was about making sure that we deliver operational excellence. She was about us, not about her. So it's almost like there's a dynamic change there. Again, I don't know whether it's driven by age, but there's that, that's that, passion and desire to be more, engaging and supporting of others rather than just being self-centered about myself and trying to, make a life for myself. I think it's about how do I want to be remembered in the organization? How do I want to be remembered in our industry? What difference have I made? I think for me, that's the driver for me at the moment.
I agree, because even if we're not remembered by a lot of people, I think if one or two people remember that you helped them or advised them or spoke out on an important topic that maybe other people were hesitant to speak out about, I think that's an important thing we need to model. Is if you see something that you think isn't the best way to do it or a right behavior, then you should say something. And I know so many people that are hesitant to do it. They're afraid to do it. They're afraid to speak up.
That's where, Sister, that's where innovation comes into play. I think it's when people begin to look at things very differently, when people have different opinions. I am not a believer that we should all speak the same voice and the same tone. I think, we should come to the table with different ideas and different thought processes, because that's where the innovation is, and that's where people become their individual self. And that's what makes us stronger together, because we're not all of the same mindset. Everybody has a varying opinion to share. And that's what makes an organization a success. And innovation it's really born out of those, uniqueness and diversity of thoughts. That's the word. I think it's very, very key. And we in the association community, we need that. We need to encourage more of those. And as we begin to prepare and coach and mentor others within the industry, I think we need to encourage those as well, because that's where the innovative ideas are going to come from.
Yes, that's exactly right, because we need the friction that comes from different opinions in order to make a spark to come up with something new or improve something we already have. So the legacy I would like to leave in my wake is that I have advocated for our profession as a profession. I have helped my profession and my colleagues, not any specific professional association that I belong to, but I've helped the people in the profession. And I have set an example of modeling ethical behavior and professional behavior and finding that courage of our convictions to use our voice when we need to. I just have to say, it's a job, and it's not always easy to find another one, but it's a job. And if you see something going on that shouldn't be happening, like unethical behavior, you should say something, because it's about what kind of a person you are. And that's what's so important about the CAE, in my opinion, is that it sets us apart as a profession. Also, we're supposed to be modeling that higher level of behavior that we would like all of our colleagues to see as well. So it's about passing on the kind of behavior we want to see in our profession. We want people to think of our profession as a good profession with good people who take doing the work seriously and being good people seriously as well.
Excellent. I think you summed it up very nicely, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense, because it's all this little things that builds character in association community and in association professionals. And again, it's not going to happen overnight. Excellence is what we need to strive for. And it just takes baby steps as we build characters in our future leaders, generation, next generation leaders, as we build these characters, as we model these characters for them. I think they too, in turn, will be better professionals. And if you've been in the association community or non-for-profit community for many years, I think you need to continue to work towards this goal of, leaving a legacy that's important, that's excellence through coaching and mentoring, however that looks for you, because there isn't a cookie cutter model for this. How we coach and mentor, it's dependent on the individual and the circumstances. So, but feel free to be able to adapt your creativity to this process. But the key is leaving some sort of a legacy behind that you will either be remembered for, or that the community, the non-for-profit community, will benefit from tremendously.
That's very well said. And one of the things, though, I wanted to mention, speaking of legacy, and you had mentioned earlier, Agnes, wanting you want people to remember you when you leave the organization or you leave the profession, for whatever reason. But one of the things I am seeing, as I am also a woman of a certain age, as the French say, is we're losing a lot of our history in our profession. So people who have done a lot to help our profession, who years ago trained a lot of the people who are still working today, they're disappearing from our memory, because there's no one out there making sure we're passing on. Do you remember Steve Carey? Do you know who Jill Cornish is? These are people who did a lot to further the profession, further communication in the profession. Steve Carey he passed away years ago, but he was a leader in association management. He was in the first. Oh, you remember Steve? So you know who I'm talking about. A lot of people don't remember him. I remember him. We got to be friends. We got to lunch together and talk about everything. And he also was one of the original ASAE fellows, one of the first 12. And he trained a lot of people, like my good friend Al Rickard worked with Steve Carey at the beginning of his career. And he passes on a lot of the things that Steve taught him. So you see that going on. Jill Cornish is in retirement, and she founded, or was one of the founders of Association Trends, the newsletter that was very influential for years when she was running it. It's changed into something different now, but I think it still tries to promote the heart of what Jill Cornish and her family did when they launched it. So some of those people are still with us, and we should know them and get to know them, and we should remind people.
Well, that's exactly, again, you remember earlier on I said, the coaching and mentoring, there isn't a cookie cutter. It just depends on the circumstances of where. Right. Part of what I do and what I think we should continue to do, and I know you do this, Cecilia, is as we mentor and coach our community or people that we walk around and we mentor, whichever way we choose to do it, it's really making sure that we remind them, that there are people that have gone ahead of us, and these are the impact that they've made within the association community. These are sharing the best practices that they've taught us, what we've learned from them, and what we're still, modeling today in our role, and say, well, you know what, if it wasn't for so and so, I wouldn't be doing this.
That's right.
They've taught me this, they've taught me this, and that's how we keep their own legacy going. And that strengthens the position, because that is our best practice, and because it worked, that's why we're able to carry that forth. So I think it's engaging constantly, just like you're doing. When you talk to your peers or mentor people in the community, the association community, non-for-profit, you remind them of the good work that these leaders have done, whether they're still here with us or whether they're not. And that's how, it carries on from generation to generation. And that's how we will not be able to forget this, pillars of our community that made a difference in our lives and in our professional career path.
Even if you don't mention that person's name to a next generation person, just passing on their knowledge, it's continuing to live on. Their impact is still real. And I think that's an important thing to say to people. I try to say to people, like, do you know who so-and-so is? If you don't, you should. Like my good friend Cheryl Ronk was a leader in association management for almost 30 years. She's retired, but I still get to work with her. She works with us at Row Tulips in our education program. And I will say to people, well, do you know Cheryl Ronk? And they say no. And I say, well, you should. And here's why you should know Cheryl, because she did a lot of cutting edge things with association management. And I try to do that. I try to say to people, you need to talk to these other people. You need to know who came before you. There's so much emphasis on the young people. Okay. And I'm just going to say this, everybody, save the angry postcards. I like young people, but there's a saying, I have nothing against young people except that age and experience will always overcome youth and enthusiasm. And there's a reason for that, because we have experience. We can put our experiences into context because we've lived longer. So I think young people are great. Don't get me wrong. I was a young person once, I'm not against it, but our emphasis on the young people, we have to get the young people. We have to get the new people. That's great, but that's just one part of the formula.
That's correct.
There's a place in that formula for all of us, because if people like you and me, Agnes, are not there to pass on the mistakes we've made to help other people not make those same mistakes again, it's why we end up in a rut. It's why we're always doing well, that's the way we've always done it thing in nonprofit management.
No, we can't do that like that. That's not striving forward towards excellence. We cannot always do it the way we've always done it. And you're right. And maybe this presents another opportunity, Cecilia, for you to engage this matrix of our community, look at how you can bring them on the show, and look at how you can continue to engage them. How can they be active? Because when you even look at the business environment, I mean, there is a drive now, at least some of the trends that I've been seeing out there. There is a drive to bring in, the retired community, to bring them back into the workforce, because that gap there is a gap, and there's a vacancy. There's an opportunity there to make a difference by this particular group. So I think that the business environment is thinking about that, and whatever we can continue to do to look at, tapping into this expertise and knowledge and experiences that have shaped industries, I think as a community, we need to continue to do so.
Exactly. And you just reminded me of one of my favorite examples from the art world. So when you think of Pablo Picasso, you think of somebody who deconstructed art. He took it apart. He did strange new ways of art and painting and showing us the world around us. But what a lot of people overlook is Picasso learned how to draw first.
That's correct.
So he was a very good artist in the traditional ways too. He learned how to be an artist before he started deconstructing art. And that's really important because I have seen, I'm just going to say it. And again, save the angry postcards if you like modern art. I've just seen some really bad modern art. I'm sorry. An empty slide projector with the light on is not art. I'm just saying. But I actually saw that at the Hirshhorn Museum one time. I was this is not art. There was also the same day I was there was a pile of dirty laundry, and this was supposed to be art. I'm like, this is not art. This is a chore. It's like, so there's art and there's real art. And I'm going to say that, because art has to speak to a larger part of who we are as human beings. Mm-hmm. And it's a good example of Picasso learning to draw before he started deconstructing art, because you can't undo a thing if you don't know how it works. It's like learning how to put a clock back together. You have to learn how the clock works so that you can put it back together. You need to have somebody showing you how to do it first before you say, well, here's a way that I can make that better. Here's it's like with anything, you have to know how it works before you can start taking it apart and saying, okay, well, here's an idea to make it better because now we have a new technology that will make it better, stronger, faster, like the $6 Million Man. But you have to know how to do it first. And we would not have been able to have Dadaism, in my opinion, if we had not had Picasso learn how to draw and then start deconstructing art, because then Dadaism started showing you art in a really different way. So when we start...
Excellent perspective, Cecilia. And that brings us back to our community, the association community, the non-for-profit community. We've got to learn what the best practices are or what it is from those who have done it, who have tried and tested it and have succeeded. And we've got to model some of those work. And also we've got to be innovative enough to take some of those thought processes and make it our own. We've got to own it and create and let innovation be born out of some of those thought processes, because that's how people become very innovative. I mean, when you look at the innovative minds of our world today, it wasn't like all new ideas. They took what is already existing of generation past and they owned some of it and made it their own. And that's how, every one of them became very innovative. And that's one of the things that we need to return back to the association community. We got to listen. We got to learn how to draw first. Then we've got to look at how we're going to make it a success within our community. And again, ties back into that legacy, providing excellent, living a legacy of excellence through coaching and mentoring. Everything ties into it. When you're doing your training, incorporating that into your training materials, which I know you do. When I'm out there in the world, when I'm mentoring, these leaders, providing some of those perspective on, let's take a step back. Let's see where we've been and let's see where we're going. And then in between, that's where the innovation is, between where you've been, where you're going, and the current state.
Yeah.
Between those three perspectives, you will find the ideas. So it's a lot of things like that. When you think about innovation, they don't have to be, big things, but they're the little things that makes a difference in our lives. Some innovations go by the wayside, but some go to leave a lasting legacy and they stay with us for years and years. And some never really go anywhere. So,
and you've mentioned this earlier in our conversation. You mentioned best practices, and I'm all for best practices if they're really best. A lot of times people just copy what other people are doing. It's not necessarily a best practice. It's just what everybody else is doing. So what's your view on that statement?
Well, for me, it's driven by industry, because honestly, that's why we have an industry best practice. As long as we go, we look at what the industry says, we look at what it's doing, and we look at how industry has used it to shape the future and achieved success towards it. I think we can consider that. I don't believe that we should just copy what we're seeing happening, because then we will be modeling failure over failure over failure, because if it hasn't worked, if we haven't tried and tested it, it makes no sense. But that's why they become industry best practices. That's why some associations actually back it, because they've done researches, they've market tested it, they've tested it within the community. People have provided feedback on how successful it's been. I think that can be called best practices, Cecilia, because that's the benchmark for us in associations or in the world that we live in. And if that level of work and attempt and processes have gone into it, and it's been declared and signed off by our industry that is best practice, I think we can adopt that. I personally, that's when I'm doing work in my own career path, when I'm doing work, that's the gold standard that I look for. What is going on in the industry? What is the industry backing as best practices? Not just some shoddy work. It has to be tried and tested. Research has gone into it. That's how I make some decisions sometimes, even in my own business world. And I just really adapt it and, add my own innovative thought process to it. But it gives you something to look forward to, not just copying anything that you find on the internet and call it a best practice. I don't think that's, that should be the case. I think, again, it's a quick fix. You got to look beyond that.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, and that's it, though. You just said a best practice actually is a best practice because it's tested, it's researched, and it's tried and true. Mm-hmm. But so often I see associations and other kinds of nonprofits looking, well, they're doing that. That must be a best practice. I'm going to do it too. Well, you need to dig a little deeper because they might be doing it and it might be a total complete failure. You don't know the outcomes. We need to know what the outcomes are. And it's still one of my favorite quotes. The first book that Jamie Notter and Maddie Grant wrote together, Humanize, they point that out. And that book came out well over 10 years ago now. But that quote has always stuck with me. Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't make it a best practice.
Agreed.
And that is really what I see, what I'm concerned about, because that's the flip side of the coin. That's why we've always done it. Well, everybody else is doing it. Well, everybody else may be wrong. It's like the thing our mothers used to say to us when we were little. Well, if everybody else was jumping off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge just because everybody else was jumping off a bridge? And
the audience are different too. So when you even take best practices, you need to look at your audience. You need to look at what are you trying to accomplish? Because within that best practices, you're going to have to tweak it and make it your own best practice for your organization based on what your organization is doing, what the mission is, what the focus is, and the goals. You can't just take best practices and just, use it. There has to be that thought process that goes into what are we trying to accomplish as an organization? And can we adapt this? Can this work for us? It may not work, but you could just tweak it. It gives you the foundation. I like to see best practices as a foundation for what you want to do, but make it your own. It's a beginning point. What do you do with it?
Yes. That is it. You just hit the nail on the head. You have to find a practice and see if it's going to work for your organization and then make it yours.
Agreed.
You can't do exactly what the other people are doing. And then that, I think, naturally leads us to the subject of sunsetting and purposeful abandonment, because we continue to do things, even though one, they don't work anymore, or two, their time has just come to end. It's time to let them go. It was a fine webinar in its day, but now it's time to retire it and get a new one. And I really would like to see all nonprofits of all kinds really have a regular review process of what we're doing. Is it working? Is it contributing to mission fulfillment first and foremost? Because that's most important. Mm-hmm. And then are we getting the outcomes that are supporting our members or our stakeholders or donor support or community and the people that we're trying to serve, no matter what kind of group we are? there has to be a process in place where you're doing this on a regular basis. It's sort of like, with what you do so well. I mean, 40,000 people at one meeting. Oh my gosh,
Well, I
but
don't
that
take
post,
credit for it. My organization, like I said, we have our domestic team that manages this, and they do an excellent job.
yeah.
And our organization leader, Stephen Miner, one of his vision for us as an organization is to make sure that our customer service, our customer journey, meets standards, and that leads to exactly the same point. Looking at what we've done, what is it that we can do better, improving those processes, and sunsetting the things that don't work. Because, again, I do agree with you. Organizations definitely need to take a step back. We can't continue just to spin our wheels, just doing the same thing over and over and over again. There are also certain things that have actually worked very well, but that you could have a spin-off. You don't have to keep it going. People get tired of it, even if it works. You got to give it a different, make it fresh, give it a fresh approach.
A little bit. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
What I was leading up to about what you do as a meeting, an event leader is probably the most important part of that process is the post-con meeting, where you sit down and you say what worked really well, what could be improved, and what didn't work, and why didn't it work, and should we keep doing it or replace it with something else. And I think that post-con meeting concept can be applied not just to meetings and events, but to every single thing an organization does. And
Agreed.
in my opinion, it should be done annually. I'm constantly amazed at how many people will say, we don't have time for that. But then they struggle to make an outdated thing keep working, or to clean up messes that didn't have to happen. So make the time, because you always seem to find the time to clean up the mess or fix the mistake. Why not use that time in a more proactive way instead of a reactive way?
Exactly. No, excellent point. Excellent point. And that process isn't easy, that debrief process. I actually work on a show because I'm focused more on the international side of the business. And I work on a show called Electricity Transformation Canada. That's the show that I work on. And I've been the show organizer now for about a year, and we've had our first debrief meeting. As much as difficult as that process can be, as for the planner, I think it's the most valuable process that a planner could ever wish for, because you're going to hear everything that went wrong, not necessarily everything that went right. And that's good, because that's really what shapes the future. That's what helps you, refine your process and helps you to prepare for the future. And I really think it's an excellent process. I always look forward to those post debrief meeting, even when I was a consultant in full-time job, and even here in this job of mine in this role. I really just find that process, I actually find it as a very creative process, because you hear it from different stakeholders, and it gives you the opportunity to help shape what the business would look like for the future, taking on board those ideas and the things that didn't work, and trying to find something that works out of it for the future. As hard as it can be, and it is very difficult, I just think that you're right, Cecilia. We need to do more of those. I agree.
I always try to do it too. Like when I'm working with a client and the project wraps up, I may not do it necessarily with the client all the time, but I do it for myself. Like, what did I do that I could do better? I do talk to the client. Are you getting what you need? Did this work well for you?
Yes.
And I do a lot of check-ins with a client too along the way. And doing those check-ins is also kind of what's working, what's not working, in case you need to make an adjustment. I think that's really important, because all plans are not set in concrete. They're not set in stone. It's okay to change your mind and say, this isn't working. Let's go in a different direction. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
And I think that in the nonprofit management world, too often we think, well, we have to keep doing this because it's what the members want. Well, I'm just going to say it. Members do not know how to run a nonprofit organization. They do not. They know how to do whatever it is they do. It's
Yeah.
like when I used to work at the American Academy of Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery. I would tell the volunteers I worked with, you wouldn't ask me to do ear surgery. I wouldn't
No.
ask you to run an association because
And believe it or not, Cecilia, the members actually depend on you, the association professional, to help drive and shape the business. So they're looking to you to do this. They're even the members are not expecting to help run your business. They are dependent on you as the professionals to help drive the future of the business, to guide them on how to be members. So to have that expectation of your members, I think it's just not, it's not the right approach. And maybe the association world or the association community needs to do a lot of self-reflection, not only, and who makes an association? You and I have had this discourse before. We make the association because we keep talking about association. We, the individuals, the professionals, are the ones that make the association. Not an organization doesn't make itself. Non-for-profit doesn't make itself. That's right. You and I that work in this business that drives the future of this. And we need to have self-reflection. What are we doing within our community that it's best for our community? What do we need to do better? We've got to ask ourselves honest questions. And when we do ask those honest questions, I think we will find the right answers. But sometimes we get into this abstract mindset, the association, the non-for-profit. Who makes the non-for-profit? Who makes the association? You and I.
That's right. Well, and that's a really good point. And I'm sure, okay, once again, audience, save the angry postcards. Yes, members are important in the life of an organization, but we all contribute to it. And if we are going to be taken seriously in the long term as a profession, as a unique, separate profession that deserves respect, we need to start saying that. We know how to manage the organization to get the best outcomes to best serve our members. Our members are there to contribute in a different way. But we also hear a lot of people talk about lack of confidence in experts now. We don't respect expertise anymore. And yet in our own profession, we're not asking people to respect ours. We have expertise. We're the experts. When I was working at the nursing home administrators group and I was in a board meeting and one of the board members said, well, we're nursing home administrators. We're used to a certain kind of report. And I said, well, but this isn't a nursing home. It's an association.
Yeah.
So that's where you see a lot of cognitive dissonance. That's where you see a lot of misunderstanding of the board's role. You don't come into your association for it to run like your factory or your law office or your medical practice or whatever sort of profession or industry you're in. It's not the same thing. And so trying to say it has to run the way your business runs is an incorrect viewpoint. It's not accurate. It's not going to work. And I think that's where a lot of organizations struggle, whether you're an association or a charity or a foundation, whatever kind of 501c you are, that's where you're going to struggle because the people that you want involved, who want to support your mission, who believe in your mission, they don't quite understand yet what we do, what we bring to the table. You have a certification. I have a certification. We've been doing this for decades. We've dedicated our whole career to this. So what makes you think we're a worker bee? And that whole concept of the staff are worker bees. I don't like that. I call people on that all the time when they say, well, the staff is just worker bees. Actually, no, they're not.
No, they're not. Absolutely
actually
not.
Highly educated, trained professionals. So no, that is not accurate.
And I think it stems from that leadership too, because the leader has to empower the staff to be able to make decisions and do the right thing. Believe that the staff can deliver results, but you've got to show yourself that you're capable of doing those things. And I think that's where the disconnect is. So there's a whole topic of conversation, the leadership gap between been a leader to, employees and vice versa. There is a tremendous gap there, and there's an opportunity there to empower your teams for success. And if you as a leader are able to do that, and that's one of the things that I really do enjoy with my current organization, I have to say, I have a great boss. His name is Gary Thorough, and one of the things that he's done and is that he's empowered me to be successful. So, and I remember he and my CEO Stephen Miner would say, "Don't just come to us, come to us with recommendations."
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is that we trust you. You're the expert. Bring the recommendation to the table, and we can opine on those recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that really refreshing. I find that, and I think in the association communities, we should do more of those. We should empower our teams to come to the table with recommendations. They're not wannabes. They are allowed to be able to come to the table with ideas on how to move the business forward. Exactly. And then the leadership can opine, or the board can opine. But and the reason why, they see themselves as wannabes is because often they're just doing the grind work. They're not coming forward with solutions. They're just, I don't know what it is. I don't know what to call it, but it's driven by leadership. It's that leadership empowering the staff to make those kind of choices that would help them be better employees, I think.
Yeah. I agree. And a couple of thoughts on that, building on what you've just shared. So when it comes to running any nonprofit, the staff and the board are on the same team, and all your other volunteer leaders. So you have many levels of volunteer leaders, but we're all on the same team, but we play a different role.
Agreed.
So we're going to play, like if it's baseball, the pitcher has a very different job than the outfielder, but they're on the same team. So the outfielder doesn't try to tell the pitcher how to pitch, and the pitcher doesn't tell the outfield how to cover the outfield. So that's really where I also see a lot of gaps. Like we're not presenting it that way. It's like the board has a unique role. It's not the board's job to run the organization. It's the board's job to bring in ideas, direction, help create strategy, but they're not there to tell everybody what to do. That is not the role. And this is a consistent fallacy that continues to be promoted across the profession. The board is not the boss. The board is not there to tell you what to do. They're there to work with you as part of the team to move the organization forward toward mission fulfillment. They are not the boss. They're not there to tell you what to do or how to do it. What you just said, you're supposed to come to them with ideas and say, here's my proposal. I think this will move the conference into an even higher revenue bracket. Oh, that's a great idea. Or, well, can you explain more? Can you, because when I was, again, at the nursing home administrators, I brought a proposal forward on a group membership, and it didn't get approved at the first time I did it because they had too many questions. And so I took that away. I was like, well, that's good input. Let me go get this other information and build a better proposal. And that's really how that should work. There's give and take, and they tell you what they think, or maybe we need more information, or they don't understand it. So they want you to explain it more. So there's that. But then the other point, there's a huge difference between a leader and a boss. You work with leaders. You don't work with bosses. Bosses just tell people what to do, and they don't want to hear what you have to say. But leaders build a team and let the team do their job.
Agreed.
And play their position. I use a lot of sports analogies, being a jock gone bad, but you have to be able to play your position. And you have to be allowed to play your position. You can't have two people playing the same position in a game. And that's what we have to really get across. I think the nonprofit management profession and community, all of us, are professionals, board members, other volunteer leaders at the chapter level, committee level, or other groups within your organization, the members overall, the people we serve. If we all came together as that team and understand we're a team, it's not a boss situation, I just think it would explode in just a really positive direction. I think we would be way more successful. I think people in the world would understand what we do. Sometimes it's a little frustrating because I think people outside the United States have a better understanding of what we do as nonprofit management professionals than people in the United States. And they're looking to us for guidance, information, role modeling, things like that. So it's like if we could get the message across within our profession, and then I think that message would much more strongly get out to the world that we're trying to help. Because there's so many of us, there's so many nonprofit organizations. And if we all did our part, it would be amazing.
And you know what, Cecilia, I think everything we've talked about today kind of wraps around where we started from, living that legacy of excellence through coaching and mentoring. So if we take a lot of those topics that we've talked about, supporting one another, remembering the leaders who have, impacted our career paths, coaching and mentoring people for success in areas of, areas of whether they're leaders or bosses or, all the topics that you and I have touched on today, it all ties into that. We can coach and mentor each other because there's a peer-to-peer coaching and mentoring as well. As you don't have to coach just the future generational leaders that we've talked about here. Coaching and mentoring takes all kinds of different forms. If we can just focus on that and make it enterprise-wide, so we support one another, you are right. Our community will be stronger, will be better, and we will leave a lasting legacy.
Yes. And I think this has been a wonderful conversation. And I know you and I could go on for another couple of hours.
I know. We love to talk
about our profession. We love to
We're
talk
very passionate about our profession. That's
we
the key.
That is one of the things we have in common is our passion. But we probably should wrap up this conversation. Otherwise, it's going to become a multi-part series. And I'll be issuing. So, no, Agnes, it's so great to have you back. It's so fun.
Thank you, Cecilia.
But I would like to ask you, as you're looking at this topic, which I think our conversation really did center around legacy and how are we moving things forward. I mean, even with our recap of how the podcast evolved, this is a legacy of work that we're sharing with our colleagues. But think with that in mind, with our overall theme, what would be the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And then how could they get in touch with you if they wanted to connect?
My closing thought on this, Cecilia, is to all nonprofit professionals out there is it's simple. Yeah. However you want to do it, leave a legacy of excellence through coaching and mentoring. That's all. However you choose to do it, there's no cookie cutter approach. Think about how you can make a difference within your organization and start from there. Rome was not built in a day. Take baby steps and focus on that. So that would be one parting thoughts that I want to leave. If anybody wants to get a hold of me or connect with me, I can be found on LinkedIn. And thank you once again, Cecilia, for giving me the opportunity to join you on this discourse. It brings back a lot of memories and fun times. And I appreciate you for the invitation. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's been so fun having you back. And happy 20th anniversary, RE Plus.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Good work all around there. Well, I want to thank Agnes for joining me again after all this time. It's been wonderful having you back. And check out RE Plus and see what they have to offer. They have a lot of different resources out there. And it's just an interesting company. And any company that makes it to the 20-year mark is doing something right, which is one of the things we talked about today. So check them out. Connect with Agnes if you have not yet connected with her. She is a stellar expert in meetings and event management. So connect with her and get some micro mentoring from Agnes. But unfortunately, we have to go rogue for now, even though it's episode 250. Thanks for joining us. Since it is episode 250, I think we've demonstrated some staying power. So if you haven't followed us or subscribed yet, please do. We're on your favorite podcast service. You can find us pretty much everywhere, including Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. So if you would like to know more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and what we can do to help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. If you're looking for some education to help get ready for the CIE exam or to get that all-important ethics renewal credit, check out our education page. Our fall session kicks off the week of September 3rd. That's it for episode 250, a deep and wide-ranging conversation on the state of our profession and our hopes for its future. So on behalf of Agnes and myself, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.